Good evening, our viewers. We are so glad you could join us for this show. This is a new show called Health Up, and we are all about health and wellness. So in this show, we are going to be enlightening you. We are going to be empowering you with knowledge and facts about health so that you may know more, and that we are also going to bring you hope through the gospel, through the light of the gospel. My name is Dr. Sylvia Mwathi. I am a pediatrician by profession, and today we are going to be discussing on the perspectives of COVID-19 today. On the show, I'm joined by two of my colleagues. We have Mr. Sami on my right, and we have Mr. Onesmus on my left, and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Dr. Sylvia. Good evening, everybody. I'm Samuel Mwangi. I'm a clinical officer by training. I fathered in emergency and critical care medicine, and I'm currently working at KMTC. I lecture there. Also coordinating in some response towards COVID-19. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Sami. Mr. Onesmus, kindly introduce yourself.
Thank you, Daktari. My name is Onesmus Mogo. I'm a clinician by profession, and this is a good opportunity. I've also done and fathered in public health, so I'm also a public health expert, and we are happy to have this show this evening, and we hope it's going to be a blessing, and as we also bring in knowledge and empowerment through this forum.
So today we'll be talking about COVID-19. We know that this is a virus that came about in Wuhan in 2019 December, when there was an outbreak of COVID-19 disease. So as it started, the outbreak has been spreading all over the world, and Kenya has not been spared. It came to Kenya on March 12th when we had our first case arrival from the airport. And since then, we have seen a lot of changes. We've had the lockdown, we've had the wearing of masks, we've had the closing down of schools, we have closing down of churches, and we have not been spared by this. But we'd like to know from Mr. Sami, why exactly has COVID-19 been such a menace? Why is it such a big problem? We have so many viruses, but coronavirus has proved to be such a menace. Maybe you could tell us more about it.
Thank you, Dr. COVID-19, it's a global pandemic. As you mentioned, it has become a burden globally. This happened, it started in China, that is last year, 2019. In November, they noted an abnormal disease, and by the end of December, they had confirmed an outbreak of a respiratory disease, which was confirmed as COVID-19. It progressed to the whole world, and many nations suffered the same problem. And WHO came to confirm it being a global pandemic in March, March 11. Yeah. And Kenya, immediately in the same duration of time, Kenya experienced and recorded its first case. Yes. It has never been the same again in all sectors, especially in the health sector, it being the lead in response towards this COVID. Right. In a nutshell, what happened is the MOH, Ministry of Health, had the protocols developed, had a plan towards response on this, and we know the National Response Plan came in place, which has been really on top of the game. Let me talk about the 18 contexts. It implemented, it started implementation of the protocols they had developed with conjunction with WHO and now MOH, forming customized protocols for us in the nation. And
why were these protocols really important? Maybe I think you would explain to the audience about the mode of transmission and why it's very important for these protocols to be put in place.
Thank you. Mode of especially COVID is a unique disease because of two major things. One, the nature of the virus, which is highly transmissible. And the mode of transmission also makes it unique from other viruses. That is, it's easily transmitted from one person to the other through few ways. But the common ones we have is droplet transmission. When someone emit some droplets through their respiratory system.
So through coughing,
talking,
singing.
Yes, all this. These droplets and they fall on a recipient who is not positive. They definitely get infected. The other thing is about transmission through touching or contact.
Okay.
This is when we touch some infected surfaces, and probably even when we greet some people who are positive, they end up transmitting this virus to us through just touching and then touching our face. And that is why this makes it very unique, because it's both a kind of a respiratory problem and a contact problem. Yeah.
So that means that the Ministry of Health had to put in place contact precautions and droplet precautions. Maybe you could mention why we have to keep on wearing our masks, and
Yes.
the issue about the social distancing. Why is that so important?
Actually, these are the most effective methods of infection prevention and control of COVID-19 disease. When someone coughs, they emit droplets, which are sometimes bigger than 5 micrometers. That is a bigger in size in terms of, that is, it can fall with a shorter distance.
Okay.
Actually, it's estimated to have an average travel from 1 to 1.5 meters in terms of distance travel. This varies with some factors, but that is the average way of it. And that's why we are supposed to have our masks put on to protect the other people and also to protect ourselves from getting infected through that method of droplet infection. And the social distance also plays a part in that, because when you stay more than 1.5 meters away from an infected person with a mask on, most likely you will get infected even when they emit those droplets which are infectious.
Okay.
And also the other thing is about hand washing.
Yes, very important.
And this because we end up, most likely we touch our face many times, we touch surfaces many times. These are common surfaces that we intermingle with every day in, day out in our daily activities, including doorknobs, staircase rails, microwaves, these surfaces, even the table surfaces where the virus can survive for some time.
So we've noted that the protocols were put in place, but if you compare how we behave right now and how we used to behave when COVID first landed, I think things have really changed. People have become so complacent, people have become so lax. We find people not wearing their masks correctly. People are not really hand sanitizing as it is. Maybe Mr. Onesmus, you could bring out what has really changed. Has COVID changed, or is it the perspective of people and COVID?
Thank you so much, Dr. Sylvia, for that. I think it's true. Since March 12, I think that's when we had the first case reported here in Kenya.
Yeah.
It was a case of travel, that came in, and everything changed.
Yeah.
So to say, the government's perspectives, sorry, and also the emphasis on the health of the people. A lot of efforts were put on COVID.
Yes.
Of course, and obviously this being a global pandemic. So things have evolved over time. It's been a long 7 months, since then.
Yeah.
And I think we are not yet off the hook. But probably to put a few things across, when the global pandemic was basically reported in Kenya, the measures were put in place, and of course protocols were being developed day by day, and there were things that were coming up, that were very new that we didn't have before. Maybe number one of the things that was really associated with this disease is a fear of the unknown, because a lot was still misunderstood about COVID.
Very true.
The modes of spread, how we could prevent it and all that.
Yes.
So one was that the disease was actually poorly understood. So it led to a lot of fear, and therefore, everything you could hear, about COVID was taken as a gospel truth.
Yeah.
And every precaution that was, relayed through, the media,
Yes.
all types of media, printed or social or otherwise, could actually be taken, and people used to fear. Number two is that we also got it being a multi-sectoral approach in terms of prevention, which is very good. Different sectors and different, departments and different, agencies came in to be able to see how we would, protect our people from this disease.
Yes.
And therefore, you could actually be arrested, by a policeman. The public health officers would, come for you.
Yes.
Regulatory bodies would come for you. For example, the public health, the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, the medical board. You need to have, some bit of some jar of water outside your business,
Yeah.
you know, outside your kinyozi, outside
Yeah.
your salon, and all these kind of, you know, things outside.
So it was really being enforced.
Yeah. It was really being enforced.
Yes.
And of course, deterrence being used as a method so that now others could learn from what others have faced.
Yes.
So the enforcement of the procedures, be it wearing of masks, social distancing, and all that. The other factor was stigma, because really COVID was looked at as being an avenue, or rather a ticket, you know, to death. Once you're diagnosed with COVID, it was really such a big thing. So a lot of stigma came along with it. I think the last that, you know, the globally that was experienced close to, you know, COVID, they tell us, is Spanish flu in the early 1900s. Therefore, it's been a long, you know, while since we had such.
Yes.
So stigma was something else. So again, people, you know, really adhered, because nobody wanted to be associated with someone or who knows someone who actually had been diagnosed with COVID. And this is what terminologies we came along.
And actually, on that issue of stigma, I think it was because initially when we had very few cases, it was easy to do the contact tracing.
Yes,
But now because
absolutely.
we have community transmission, you know, you don't know where you got it from. So even though you had to do contact tracing, it would be very hard. But at that time, the stigma was these people who are dressed in PPE will come for me in my house. I don't want to open my house and find people dressed in white coming for me. But now that has really gone down.
It has really gone down. So these are some of the things that came along. And then obviously with time, you know, there were these restrictions that were enforced, you know, travel restrictions, trans-border, curfew regulations, you know, mass gathering, and all these kind of regulations that were put in. And of course that impacted, you know, positively to an extent in terms of prevention of the spread of the disease, but also impacted negatively towards, you know, many other factors like the economy of the nation. So along the line, you know, the government had, you know, keep on shifting, you know, changing the measures or the protocols, adjusting them just to suit the prevention and the approach of all this. So as that happened again, though it was good, because at some point I remember, you know, all of us, you know, the president even had to come out, you know, and engage experts, you know, economic experts and also health experts, and be able to have a balance of what exactly we go for. Do we go for the health of the people? Do we go for the economic of the people? Or, I mean, what do we lose from each? And as we continued on to have these measures and these restrictions one of the things that arose that was a bit unfortunate was misinterpretation. You know, that COVID, at some point, COVID is no longer there, because, you know, the borders are opened, you know, curfew has been eased. Yes. So that began, or that initiated some laxity that we actually see, you know, where people are not, you know, doing the social distancing, which we call social distancing, you know, wearing of masks, sanitizing, and these kind of things. Number two, I think it came out very clearly, even through the ministry, that now individuals have to take personal responsibility. And, you know, that meant that, you know, whatever enforcement that was being brought in, either by, you know, the pharmacy sponsors boards, you know, these regulatory bodies like public health, and the Ministry of Health, you know, the police service, you could rarely find, you know, this kind of arrest. Well, they are still taking place here and there, but, you know, the people have the responsibility
on their own
hands. In their own hands. So you get COVID, but you're responsible, right? So, you know, with that, again, you know, some people feel, well, I mean, it's loose, it's lax, so I can behave the way I want. So, which is a bit unfortunate, because COVID is still here with us. So that's another matter that also, you know, contributed. Probably, you know, another one.
But I also think when they did the lockdown for about like the 3 months, people, once the inter-county transfers were allowed, people allowed to move from one county to another, and people felt like maybe this COVID is really not serious. It was because of the economy, as you've said, but it doesn't mean that the transmission of COVID went down. Actually, we saw a surge in July, and when you look at the data, you find that at that point, that's when the numbers actually rose, just after this opening of the counties. So it's important for us to ensure that we still protect ourselves. The government does not want people to sleep hungry or to starve, and doesn't want the economy to go down, but COVID still exists, and people need to remember that numbers are still rising, cases are still rising. Yeah, maybe you could continue as where you had stopped.
Yeah, and I think well, probably we remember, from the Ministry of Health through the CS, basically also announcing that the disease is now there in the community.
Yeah.
At some point we thought this is just, somewhere hanging, and with some travelers here and there, we're just coming. And we only have a few people, the travelers in, so that now when we close the traveling and we have those people quarantined, that we no longer have the disease. But it came a point that the disease is actually within the community. And that happened because even when we saw the disease coming and people began being infected, and the numbers were rising steadily, over time, and the traveling, continued once the border, the cross-border or the trans-border movements were allowed. We also realized that the groups, because has actually been shown that the older age group were more vulnerable, for the disease, as opposed to the younger age group and the children.
Okay.
So there was a lot of travel also towards, the countryside and everywhere.
Yeah.
And that also began to bring in a rise in the numbers, especially within the communities, within the countryside, within the villages, and the numbers went high.
Yes, they did.
And because there was a misinterpretation that the fact that we have been allowed to travel, then there's no COVID, but the numbers, went on high and high. So I think these are some of the things that, and probably just also to mention one more, is that because of the way the economy was, and a big population of our nation also, thrive. They are in the little businesses that we do, in the small businesses that we do. We went back because we had been on, restriction.
Yeah.
We called it lockdown, but basically restriction. So went back with a lot of energy. We needed to make business. We needed to make ends meet, and therefore, with this, we forgot about COVID, and the main thing became about making a living, because we were behind. People were so pressurized by small things that keep us running on and on. Is it food? Is it rent? Whatever it is. So we went back with a lot of energy and forgot about these measures, these precautions, and that became a story of the past.
So we should have just gone back to work and still maintained the precautions.
And still maintain the precaution,
Yes,
because
yes.
there's no point. We haven't come to a point whereby we have been declared COVID free. There's still the argument of this is the second wave. We are getting the second wave, but there's still questions. What about the first wave? When was the end of the first wave? Did we really flatten the curve for continuous 14 days and all that? As the MOH will tell us. So these are the things. These are the details.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for those. So I'd like to ask Sammy, because you mentioned that you work at KMTC. So what kind of changes did COVID bring to your institution?
Thank you. Since when we recorded the first case in the country, all learning institutions, things changed because of the population of the students, the interaction of the students, and the nature of COVID-19 transmittability. So as an institution, from our end, definitely we closed down with advice from the MOH and many others institutions. And later on, our facility was chosen to be a quarantine facility.
Okay.
By this time, we were handling the travelers in this sense that Kenyans who were abroad and who wanted to come back by their own means. And later on, there are those Kenyans who were to be repatriated by the government.
Yes.
So the protocols by then were that these people, when they come into the country, they have to be quarantined for minimum 14 days. Then they be tested for COVID-19. If they're negative, they are released to the community. Those who are found positive, they were taken to an isolation facility, which we saw ourselves transition from quarantine of the travelers and to isolation of the same group.
So would you be able to maybe explain to the audience what exactly you mean by a quarantine facility and as opposed to an isolation facility? Yeah.
Thank you. For quarantine facility, this is when the high risk population is isolated, not to mix with the general population in matters of control of spread of a disease. Remember, for quarantine, these people are high-risk population. They are not confirmed to be positive.
So these are suspects.
These are suspects.
Okay.
Yes, they could have probably been exposed to a positive patient somewhere, and they are suspected to be infectious. Probably they are in prodromal stage of a disease or the pre-symptomatic stage.
Okay.
By that nature, these people are held in a quarantine facility.
And I think that was important at that time because it was initially when we thought COVID was not in the community, it was mostly from people who had traveled from abroad.
Absolutely, Doc. You know, if there's something that really government did on time was trying to keep this virus outside the country. And by the fact that whoever comes in had to be observed 14 days, try to keep the virus outside until that point where we had community spread. And that really worked and helped the country, especially the health system, the health facilities and the systems in the Ministry of Health, because we were able to maintain the integrity of our health facilities. We were not overwhelmed at one point because there was good time of people rethinking, reinventing, and understanding the virus.
True.
Yeah.
True. And so at the quarantine facility, what exactly used to be done to these people? In
the quarantine facility, what we did to this, it's purely under the guidelines of MOH. These people were to observe the basic IPC mechanism, the IPC guidelines, that is infection prevention and control, through wearing a mask every time and keeping social distance of about a meter, 1.5 meters, and hand washing. Then these people were to be monitored of any symptoms that could suggest they are infected. That is, their temperature were taken twice a day, and they were really educated on COVID-19 progression of the disease itself, so that they took responsibility of themselves within the facility in terms of infection prevention, identification of early symptoms, and also self-evaluation and taking responsibility for themselves.
So if they didn't develop the symptoms, then they would be allowed to go home?
Until they were tested.
Okay.
Whether they did have the symptoms or not, all of them had to be tested. And many of them who are found positive didn't even elicit symptoms. Just a few who probably developed obvious symptoms, and probably they were mild to moderate symptoms, and they were literally taken care of in the health facilities.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe you could also mention about the isolation. So once they test positive, they would now be moved to a different facility?
Yes.
Okay.
In isolation, now we are dealing with patients.
Yes.
Patients who are sick with COVID, who are infected with COVID, whether they have symptoms or not.
Okay.
It's good to mention that over 80% did not have symptoms, although they elicited very mild symptoms.
Okay, that is good.
Such as just mild fever, myalgia, that is general body aches, and probably malaise. And they could at times assume that. Many of them did not elicit even those simple symptoms. That is in isolation. Isolation, also we had the category of patients with moderate symptoms, which included a cough, fever, which were of concern to them, and sometimes abdominal pains, abdominal discomfort, loss of taste and smell.
Okay.
And is still in isolation facilities where we had patients now who are literally sick with COVID. This included them having difficulty in breathing, respiratory issues who needed support, and they were called the critical patients. Sometimes they were ventilated in ICUs, they needed oxygen supplementation and medication as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically in the isolation, they were in categories. So we had the patients with mild symptoms, moderate and severe.
Absolutely.
And they would get treatment based on that.
Absolutely.
So viewers, we're going to go on a break. And when we come back from the break, we're going to look at the different treatment modalities for all these patients. We've seen there are 3 categories. We're going to look at the 3 categories, and Mr. Onesmus here will take us through different treatment modalities for our patients.